Jim Martorano from All About Town. I'm very lucky to have as my guest a person I've known for a long time. He probably won't admit how old our friendship goes back, but it goes back a long time. And I'm honored because this is, you go through life, you meet a lot of people, but you don't meet anybody with the integrity and character of this man. He's running for Supreme Court in Westchester, more than Westchester, more than five counties. And he deserves to be considered because, in my mind, there is no better candidate, no better person. David Zuckerman's a guy I met in the DA's office how many years ago?
I want to say it was 40 years ago right now when we started working. We were adversaries, you and I.
Never.
And I was a prosecutor, and you were a famous defense lawyer. I learned a lot from you.
I appreciate it. Where did you grow up, David?
I'm originally from Long Island. My family was out there for many years. And then I went to college. I'm a SUNY grad. I went to law school, came back to New York, and eventually moved up to Westchester. I've been in Westchester now for 38 years now.
Now, again, this is a person that's accomplished a lot. He's a prestigious judge in White Plains, but, we can call him David, no problem, because he's not that kind of person. He's not a person that flouts his accomplishments. He, in fact, is a regular guy who treats everybody fairly in his courtroom. I've been to his courtroom, and I've seen him in action. But let's go back a little bit. You were a DA, and then what's the next step after your DA hood?
So I was a prosecutor in New York City for 4 years. When I left there, I opened a law practice up here in Westchester County in White Plains with a partner named Carlos Cruz. We practiced together for about 25 years. That we were very active litigators here in Westchester County. I then became the judge in Chappaqua in the town of Newcastle. I had that job for 5 years. But that's a part-time job, so I was able to continue practicing as a lawyer. But 10 years ago, I was elected to Westchester County Court. And when you have that job, you can't practice as a lawyer anymore. So I had to give up my practice and have been a full-time judge ever since.
You're running for a 14-year term on the Supreme Court. For people that don't understand the difference between the county and Supreme Court, the jurisdiction of Supreme Court is much wider. Could you talk a little bit about, you may end up being sent out to how far away?
Well,
assuming you get elected.
You took the words out of my mouth. But so to answer your question, Jim, the county court principally handles very serious criminal trials. Murder, robbery, rape, all the serious crimes. And the Supreme Court, on the other hand, is not what many people think of as a Supreme Court, because it's not like the Supreme Court in Washington, the highest court in the land. The Supreme Court in New York State is actually a trial court. The trial courts in New York State are broken up into districts. So our district here in Westchester is the 9th Judicial District, but it also includes Putnam County and Dutchess County, Rockland County, and Orange County. So to answer your question, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I can sit in any one of those 5 counties.
When I ran for Congress in 2006, the 19th Congressional District, it's been redistricted. It also was of 5 counties. And we had, in the primary, there were 6 Democrats running for the primary. And we had 13 debates, but all over the place. I mean, we went so far that people had accents. That's how far it goes. But I want the viewers to know, not only have I known this person for 40 years, but his reputation in the criminal court is stellar. His reputation as a lawyer, his reputation as a district attorney, and his reputation as a judge are without blemish. He is a credit to all people who believe in the legal system, and we want to keep him going. But one of the things that falls in line with that, we live in a day where every day you open the paper and there's corruption. You hear about people being arrested, people having conflicts of interest. I myself am the chairman of the Yorktown Board of Ethics, and we look for conflicts of interest. Judge Zuckerman, in his way, has decided to ban all contributions to his campaign to avoid any possible conflict of interest, and that's kind of controversial.
I decided to do that because when I think about politicians, government service, and we can all disagree about what's right and wrong when it comes to our government leaders. Oftentimes, the wrong decision seems to be made not because people don't care, but because they're influenced by things that should not influence them, and particularly it's money. I think we can often agree, for example, that certain groups may have outsized influence just because they have money. I'm thinking of perhaps big businesses, or you could say certain lobbies. Even in our local governments, the big land developers sometimes get deals that perhaps they shouldn't get, and you find out later on that there were contributions made to the leaders. When it comes to judges, our rules are a little bit different from other people running for office. For example, in theory, we're not supposed to know who contributes to our campaigns. But it's public knowledge. There's no way that it can be kept secret. We have to report it. Moreover, a typical fundraiser is an event where the candidate is there. So if I hold a fundraiser and I see people there, the only way they got in is by writing a check to my campaign. There's no way that the candidate for judge can't know. And I'm confident that anyone who donated to my campaign would be treated the same as anyone who didn't. But my concern is deeper than that. I'm worried that anyone looking at what I do as a public official, as a judge, would have that thought in the back of their mind. That someone might say, wow, that lawyer got a break in front of that judge because that lawyer or law firm contributed to the judge's campaign. I don't want anyone to even have that thought. So I'm not taking any contributions from any lawyers, any law firms, any litigants, anything of the sort, so that I hope people will see me as being totally above board.
So I guess I could put my check away. No,
I wouldn't take it anyway.
It wasn't that large, trust me. So you've been on the bench for quite a while now. Can you tell us what was your best day on the bench and what was your worst?
Sure. I'll tell you a story, because my best day on the bench wasn't on the bench. I'd been a judge for quite a while. And this story actually happens in Home Depot down in, I think it's Elmsford. And I was in the store looking in the plumbing aisle for a part. I happen to be a terrible plumber, but I was trying. And I'm down on the floor looking through a bin for whatever it was, and I get a tap on my shoulder from behind. And a deep voice says to me, hello, Judge. Now, I'd been a judge for quite a while, and as you might imagine, my decisions don't make everyone happy all the time. No, that's a very challenging moment for a judge. So I very slowly stood up and turned around, and I'm looking at a man. I'm 6'1", and I felt very small in front of this man, and now I was even more concerned because I'd never seen this man in my life. Huh. And in my total ignorance, I just said to him, who are you?
A good question.
And he said to me, and this is the story he told. He said, Judge, I never thought you'd remember me. He said, it was a while ago, and I was in your courtroom. My daughter had been out of control. She wasn't doing what we asked her to do. She was hanging around with all the wrong kids. She wasn't going to school. And one day she got arrested. And we were in the courtroom, meaning he and his wife. And we watched our daughter be brought in with shackles on her legs and in handcuffs. It was the worst day of our lives. My wife and I were crying in your courtroom. And you were sitting on the bench. And he said, Judge, you sent her, made her go, because she didn't want to a drug treatment program. She did the program. She finished it. She came home to us. She went back to school. She graduated high school. She didn't hang out with those kids anymore. She got a great job. She's doing great. He said, Judge, I never thought I'd see you again. I just wanted to thank you. He put his hand out. We shook hands, and he walked away. That's the best day of my life as a judge.
And the worst. If you want to share that, that might be a little too much to share.
My worst day as a judge was in the winter of 2020. In the court where I was sitting then, I was what's called the duty judge. And one of the things that I did as the duty judge was reviewed the bail that was set by other judges. And a gentleman was brought before me. I don't want to give his full name. His name was Miguel. Miguel was very sick. He had a bad drug problem. And I assumed to enable him to get drugs, he also was a burglar. And Miguel had been arrested and charged with another burglary, and another judge had set significant bail, and he wasn't able to get out of jail. Our county jails in Valhalla. He had been there for a while. And his lawyer came to me and said, Judge, we want you to let him out. He's sick. It's Christmas. This was right before Christmas, obviously. And he doesn't have money to post bail. And there's COVID in the jail. And if he gets sick, along with his other problems, it's really potentially fatal for him. And it struck a nerve with me. And I let him go home. We call that ROR in the courthouse, release on recognizance. The next day, Miguel was found dead of an overdose. I've never forgotten his face. That was by far the worst day I've ever had as a judge.
Well, let's order a drink now from the, we're here at the Gramercy, and so please, 2 Chardonnays. But thank you for sharing that. One of the things, you've done a lot of things, I have your card in front of me. If somebody wants to look you up on social media, how can they do that? I see this Zuckerman _4_ Supreme _court. Is that the best way to find you? Or is it Facebook the best way?
I have a Facebook page. I have a Twitter page. We do a few other social media things. We're constantly posting.
Oh, you are?
You can get all that. You can reach out to us at Zuckerman for Supreme Court at Gmail. We're pretty responsive whenever we get inquiries, that kind of thing as well. There's also through the county Democratic Committee ways to find out about me there too.
One of the things that's interesting is that you mentioned the word Democrat. Unlike races for other positions, judicial races allegedly are more civil. Would that be fair to say? I mean, I'm not that you're running for not civil court. I mean, it just generally there's a higher degree of intellectual, hopefully, back and forth, and less of a you find in regular politics. Well, politics.
Well, further your point, Jim. The truth is we are very much restricted as judges or judicial candidates with what we can speak about. So, for example, if you're running for elected office other than judge, you have a platform. You can talk about things that you plan to do or things that are important to you so people can understand and perhaps vote for you on those issues. Judges, on the other hand, can't speak about issues because we can't discuss anything which might come in front of us as judges. Yeah. So most judges are running on their backgrounds or their experience and things of that nature. So, for example, I can't say I'm going to lower your taxes or raise your taxes. I can't say I'm going to fill the potholes or where I stand on important issues of the day. I get asked all the time, and I can't answer those questions. It's unfortunate because I do have opinions about all those things. But as a candidate, and for the last 15 years as a judge, I'm prohibited from doing that. So it's a little bit different in what our discourse is running for judge compared to, for example, running for your local town supervisor or city mayor.
Right. Now, one of the things, I mean, I've known you a long time, and I think of you as the same guy I knew 40 years ago, but I understand you're a grandfather. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I'm happy to, anytime. Yes, I'm a grandfather. I'll say this. It's funny how life moves forward. I did lose my wife suddenly 4 years ago. I know you know that. And 3 years ago, I was given the best gift I ever received. My daughter-in-law gave me a grandchild, and they named her after my wife. And it has brought more joy to me than anything I can imagine. It's the greatest gift I ever received. And I used to hear people say all the time how great it was being a grandparent, and I'm not going to try to explain the joy that you get as being one, because I never understood it when other people talk to me about it. I can't give you the words that convey that sort of emotion and how my heart races just thinking about it when you just asked me the question, this adorable child. But as my friend Larry says, if I knew how great this was, I would have had the grandkid first.
That's a great thought. But as you can see, this is a gentleman who wears his heart on his sleeve and always does the right thing. One of the things I noticed in your card is that you were at one point a court-appointed guardian, conservator, and committee for the incompetent. What was that like? That must have been really difficult emotionally.
It is and it isn't. I'll tell you why. I was fortunate because judges over the years have trusted me and given me those assignments or appointments to help people who need legal representation, or some of it's actually not even legal, in connection with disabilities, or if they're children, they're just too young to be able to do those things for themselves. So I'll give you one example. I was appointed, it's a term that's no longer used, a conservator for a disabled veteran. And this gentleman had been injured at Normandy in World War II during the invasion. He was driving an LST, and it got hit by a rocket. And he had been disabled ever since, mentally and physically. And he was living in a home for veterans, and he had no family. He had nobody. And I got to know him very, very well, and helped him through everything and whatever he needed. I was the person who made the decisions, who took care of whatever his needs were. I would have done that if the judge hadn't appointed me, but I wouldn't have met him but for that. And it's one of the truly rewarding things that I got to do while I was still an attorney.
Now, right now, you're sitting on the third floor of that beautiful building in White Plains. What is it, room 302, I believe, right? Is that right? Yes. What kind of cases come before you now, as you sit there now?
So I sit now in the Supreme Court of the state of New York. I'm actually running for a job I'm already doing. The Supreme Court, as I mentioned earlier, handles at the trial level almost all the cases that are non-criminal. We have specialized courts, for example, for estates. That's the surrogates court. There's a family court that handles there's specialized courts, but the general court is the Supreme Court of the state of New York. So right now I have assigned to me somewhere around 500 civil cases where parties are litigating, someone suing someone or bring a petition against someone on a vast array of different things. It's almost anything you could think of that could be in a lawsuit, I have it in front of me right now.
Before I started at Legal Aid, there was a hiring freeze when I got out of law school. So I had my own practice for a little while in Yonkers. And one of the things I thought was challenging, I'm sure you experienced this, when a person comes before you, a client, you have to learn so many different things and become a little mini expert on different negligence issues, all kinds of from A to Z. How do you have 500 cases of a variety of things. How on earth do you research all those cases?
Well, since I've been on all the different sides of the courtroom, it's a little bit easier for me. I've been a private lawyer. I've been a prosecutor. I've been a judge. I've seen the courtroom from all the different angles. And what I typically say to the lawyers is, if there's two lawyers there, I'll say, of the three lawyers in this room, I know the least about the case
Right.
because they know so much more that I don't even get to see or hear as the judge. However, with respect to your question, the lawyers, when they come to me, have to argue their position. So I get one side and then I get the other side. I don't have a dog in the race. So for me, it's the easiest of the three also, because I just have to decide what's right and wrong. You're right that I need to know the law to do that, and I can't make a decision without knowing what the law tells me to do. So when I see what the lawyers are arguing, they typically narrow down the question that I have to decide, and then it makes it easier for me to go back to the law and find out what the law says I'm required to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, that the litigants actually supply a lot of the information. But at some point, you've got to go and do a little research. When we started out, when I started out, we had books, McKinney's, I guess. And McKinney's is like a whole shelf of these black books. And then they would have supplements every year, right? And then you had... You went back. Why? Because a large part of what we decide, what judges decide, I said we, I just elected myself. What judges decide is based upon prior decisions by higher courts. So you look in McKinney's and you find, the cases, and then you do what they call shepherdize. And that was another series of red books, right? And that was fun.
You're dating yourself.
I am dating. It's much cheaper to date.
There's no more shepherds anymore.
No more shepherds anymore, right?
So,
oh boy.
You mentioned McKinney's also.
Yes.
McKinney's is a series of books, but everything's online now.
You're right. Really?
We rarely go to books anymore, and but the process is pretty much the same. So when I went to law school, a professor said to me, "The law is a jealous mistress. You have to keep working at it. You have to keep up with it. It changes all the time." And it's important to keep up, obviously, with the changes. You have to know everything when the issues come before you. So there are ways to do that. We get what's called slip opinions. That's the most recent decisions from other judges.
So those are on paper?
No.
No, they're not on paper. No.
They're online, too.
No more paper?
Well, everything I sign is actually a piece of paper. All my orders and all my decisions are written, but then they're uploaded and they're online, too.
Do the lawyers hand motions in on paper?
No.
No?
So in some courts, you're required to do that. Yeah. My court is a paperless system.
Paper.
You can file everything digitally. Some things you have to physically walk in and give, but everything I read is on my screen.
That's amazing.
Every now and then someone needs an emergency order and I'm signing it or doing it. And many things that I actually sign are reduced to paper. I print them after I've seen them digitally. And then my signature is on a piece of paper on every order. But most of the work we do is digitally.
When we started out practicing law, I'm a little older than this young guy, but I worked on 161st Street, and there was a little candy store or whatever. I don't think they even have them anymore. And in the back of the candy store, there were a bunch of forms.
Do you remember the name?
You do.
Bloomberg Forms?
That's right. Oh, Bloomberg Forms, right. That's right. And so if you were, like, say, a petition of some type, an eviction or something, whatever it is, you would go in there and say, could I have one of those forms and also some M&Ms? And the guy would give you the candy. Sometimes we had what was the name of that drink? It was chocolate with seltzer. It was very big in the Bronx, and I can't think of the name.
Egg cream?
That's it. I'm sorry. Wasn't that what it was? Chocolate and seltzer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
An egg cream with seltzer.
Did you have that in Long Island?
Sure.
Oh, okay. I never had that in Connecticut, but when I moved to New York and I went to the Bronx, people were always screaming about egg creams. I don't know if you remember this Dottie's. Remember Dottie's?
No.
Dottie's was across the street from the criminal court. I think there's a laundromat there now. And it was an old style type of soda fountain type of place. And if you went there in the afternoon, there was elderly African-American gentleman who would make the greatest malted milks. But you had to catch him when he had some time. If it was lunchtime, he was too busy. Forget it. But if you went there about 3:30 after your last case was called, He would make the best malted milks and the best egg creams. But I loved egg creams. But anyway, Bloomberg forms. You go in the back. You'd say, I need an order for this or that or whatever. And sure enough, they'd pull it, and they were pretty useful, right?
I think the forms themselves you don't buy anymore, but I suspect online somewhere lawyers can find forms for everything that they want to do. The Bloomberg form was on paper and you'd fill in the blanks.
That's right.
Whereas now you would, again, digitally, and it would produce the thing looks a lot nicer. You're not handwriting anything in. But yeah, I remember we used them regularly, of course.
So do you no longer use emails? Can lawyers make motions through email in your court?
Well, the motion is filed through what we call the NYCEF, NYSCEF system, which is the virtual system where you upload your motion. So you just scan it and upload it into the system.
I really need to hire a 19-year-old to help me with this stuff, scanning and uploading. I have an old-fashioned printer that breaks down, and scanning and uploading is beyond me. But anyway, so we're running out of time. I could talk to Judge Zuckerman for hours, and it's my honor to do that because he is a wonderful man. But if you're thinking about this November voting, please do. Please, everyone should vote. And you'll see on your ballot, again, it's paper, still paper ballots, but you put them in an electronic machine.
Well, I remember pulling the levers.
Yes.
But we don't do that anymore.
And when I grew up in Connecticut, you had one big lever. My dad ran for mayor as a Republican back in 1964, and he was all upset because Goldwater was running against Johnson. And people that voted for Johnson would pull this lever, and every Democrat would pop down. And if you wanted to vote for my dad, you had to go back in there and change one of the things. So he got clobbered. But anyway, in any event, please, when you go to the polls in November, what date in November is the election?
Tuesday, November 8th.
Well, you know that, right? Yeah, I understand. I used to memorize the date, and it used to haunt me. I used to count the number of days to the. Do you know how many days to the election?
No, I don't.
I used to count the number of days to the election because you want to go out and campaign. What's like your campaigning schedule like? Is it really hectic? You're working full time.
Every day, because as I mentioned earlier, the election covers 5 counties.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of real estate to cover.
Yeah.
It's busy.
Anyway, if you happen to be in that real estate, please vote for David Zuckerman because, as you can see from this interview, you're going to get a real judge with a great heart, who's fair to both sides, all sides, and who has unquestionable integrity. And we're lucky. Anybody involved in the law is lucky to have him on the bench and lucky to have him in the legal profession. He's a credit to his peers, and I am honored to call him my friend. So thank you, David, for coming today. And I look forward to seeing you on the bench another 14 years. God help me. I'm moving to Florida. Anyway, thank you. This is Jim Martorano from All About Town saying good night. Thank you for watching, and please go vote on November 8th.